Hello, I'm Org, and in this video I would like to talk about some of the changes coming up in patch 4.1 of World of Warships Open Beta. When I say changes coming up, they are subject to change. This is only the very first iteration of the test server, and I am sure there will be changes in the future. I should also mention, the footage you are watching is the first battle I ever had in a ranked battle, which is a new game mode that will be coming out in patch 4.1. Well, we'll say off the start, I don't actually do very well in this battle, but the way it works is that you start off at rank 25, and basically I only get matched with other rank 25 players. If I win, I gain a star. If I lose a star, and once I gain 2 stars, I go up to rank 24. A few more stars, I'm at rank 23, and rank after that, so on. And the way it is that it's basically supposed to put you into game with players of roughly your same skill level to kind of just get a more competitive feel. And of course the game's only 7v7. But before we get into it, well, I'll show you a bit more about that. I was just going to talk about some more of the balance changes, because there are actually kind of only 1 or 2 really big changes coming up in this patch, but there are lots and lots of kind of small balance changes. I'm just going to start off by talking about the destroyers first off, because with the low tier destroyers I feel they're kind of getting the most, well, not even the most, but they're getting very significant changes. Firstly, the Sampson and the Wickes for the US destroyer line are both getting, I suppose it's buffs to their firepower. From what I can see on the test server, they are both getting a pretty significant increase to their turret traverse time. It is dropping from 18 seconds on the live server down to 12.9 seconds at the moment. So that is pretty significant increase, and it allows the Sampson and the Wickes to manoeuvre much more effectively while keeping their guns on target to engage enemies. I've also read that they were intending to do a rate of fire increase for these 2 low tier American destroyers, but that hasn't been reflected on the test server yet. But either way, that's actually, well, turret traverse buff is actually quite significant for these 2 ships. The Japanese destroyers, however, are not faring so well. Well, they're getting a mixed bag. The big story with the Japanese destroyers is that the Minekaze at tier 5 is getting a massive nerf. The Minekaze is losing its top torpedoes, so now it will only have a 7 km maximum range, and at the same time it's getting its detection range increased by 300 meters, which means that there's only going to be about an 800 meter window between the range where the Minekaze can fire its torpedoes and the range when the Minekaze will be spotted. So it's basically, well, not basically, it's effectively lost its ability to do stealth torpedo attacks. I can kind of see the reason Wargaming's doing this. I think it's basically because people are joining the game, rushing up to their tier 3 battleship, they are thinking they are awesome, and then they're being torpedoed by a Japanese destroyer that they didn't see, didn't know was there, didn't know to dodge, didn't know anything about it, then suddenly they're dead. So effectively they've kind of removed stealth attacks from, tier 5, which means that you won't encounter them until you're in your tier 4 battleship at the earliest, simply because the Mutsuki is the first Japanese destroyer that can really effectively do it. But along those lines, well, the Mutsuki's also had a slight increase to its detection range, but not enough that really matters since its torpedoes are being left the same. But all the Mutsuki, the Minekaze and the Wakatake are at the same, they're getting their guns buffed. All 3 of them are actually getting a pretty significant turret traverse increase. The Wakatake and the Minekaze are down to 30 seconds to turn 180 degrees, which still isn't fantastic, but it is much better than they are at the moment on the live server, while the Mutsuki is actually getting a really huge increase. They 18 seconds to turn 180 degrees, which, well, it's the same traverse speed as the Sampson and the Wickes on the live server now, and the guns on those two destroyers are actually perfectly adequate for, you know, close range maneuvering fighting with other destroyers. So the Mutsuki is actually getting a really significant buff in this patch, and especially since it will be the first destroyer in the Japanese line really able to effectively do stealth torpedo attacks. I think this will become a new kind of fan favourite ship, the Mutsuki that is. And I should also mention, it's getting 18 seconds to do 180 degrees, but currently it actually takes 40 seconds for the Mutsuki to do 180 degrees, so the traverse speed has been more than doubled on this ship. Might actually be a bit much, because it would, well, makes this ship clearly the best gunship in the Japanese destroyer line, but we'll have to wait and see. There are two new maps. One of them, which I am completely forgetting the name of, but it's based on the Guadalcanal battle, I should say, and it's basically dominated by two large islands in the centre of the map. There's a fairly narrow strait in between them, and two kind of safer areas off around the sides of the island, but going the safer route will actually take you pretty far away from the capture points, which, well, you should be seeing the video now. It'll be down, see where the capture points are on the map in the bottom right corner. So as you can see, if you go around the straits to either the north or the south, you're going to be taken a fair way away from the capture points, and while it's safer route to the enemy, it's going to take you be a bit less strategic in positioning. The other new map is based on the Mediterranean, and well, it's called Straits, I can remember this one's name. And your team splits starts off split in half, with half your team in the north, half your team in the south, and kind of a chain of islands separating the two. There are kind of three passages north to south to link up with your teams, and from looking at the map, it seems that the central strait right in the middle of the map is going to be kind of the strategic point in this map, simply because if your team can control that area, you're going to have a much more rapid route to move north and south, or northeast, northwest, whatever. I've also got the a different domination version of this map, where you can see that the central strait is actually the B point, which further enhances its strategic significance. Oh, and just for the record, there have been people saying that in this patch it seems that Citadel hits are becoming less common, and that regular, or I should say over penetrations, are becoming less common, and at the same time Citadel hits are becoming less common. This hasn't been my experience, and I was just going to show you the end result screen of that game on Straits just to show that, where I got a ridiculously high number of Citadel penetrations, considering I only got, I think, 40 armor piercing hits. So as far as I can tell, everything's the same as it always has been in terms of over penetration Citadel hits, just firing armor piercing in general. The Japanese carriers are, well, they're getting, I suppose it's a bit of a nerf. Basically, there is no longer the possibility for a Japanese carrier to take only bombers into the battle. Every loadout they have has at least one fighter squadron. The matchmaking for carriers has also been changed so that they are symmetrical. Basically what that means is that if you're in a tier 4 carrier, every game you play there'll be at least one tier 4 carrier on the enemy team to match you. So, well, say for example you're in your Hosho and your team gets an independence. On the enemy team you'll have a tier 6 carrier and a tier 4 carrier. It's just to make the teams more balanced and make aircraft carrier play, I suppose, more fair. They've also apparently changed it so that lower tier fighters will be more able to fight higher tier fighters or higher tier bombers. I haven't actually noticed the difference myself, but probably require more, testing before I can actually, definitively figure out what's going on there. One thing that's got people excited is that all battleships have had their accuracy within 3 kilometers increased dramatically. I never actually found this to be that huge a problem, simply because I very rarely took my battleships within 3 kilometers of the enemy, but for some people it was quite a big deal, and they are actually noticeably a lot more accurate at very close ranges. The only real change to battleship balance, or a particular battleship balance, is the Wyoming at tier 4 for the Americans, which has had its turret reverse increased dramatically. At the moment on the live server it takes 45 seconds for the Wyoming to traverse its turret 180 degrees, whereas at the moment it takes 51.4 seconds for the Wyoming to traverse its turret 180 degrees, which, well, it's a significant increase, and it's also very, well, it's very noticeable. You can no longer kind of turn the Wyoming and expect your turrets to keep up with target tracking and the like. And also note that that was with the upgraded hull. With the stock hull on the Wyoming, your turret reverse is 60 degrees per second, which, well, a full minute to turn from your turrets from one broadside to the other. It makes essentially tacking from port to starboard very costly in this ship. But Wyoming, it was a very powerful ship to start with, so it can probably afford to have the loss, especially since it's still got so many guns on its broadside. The Hydroacoustic boost consumable has also been buffed. It now lasts for 90 seconds. I would like to say that I've kind of tested to see if it made a difference, but I've been going out into battles with Hydroacoustic boost, you know, loaded onto my ships, and I've actually never been in a situation where I felt the need to use it. So I can't actually really say whether that extra however many seconds longer it goes for now is actually making a significant difference. Amongst the cruisers there are 2 changes. The Omaha gets a range increase. It's just short of 15 kilometers now, which wouldn't go so far as to say that was needed, but it still is welcome. Whereas the Furutaka gets a couple of much needed buffs. Firstly, the ship rudder shift has been increased, so it's a bit more agile. The turret reverse has been increased fairly significantly from 45 seconds to turn 180 degrees as it is currently, down to 36 I believe is the current one, or I should say current, the one on the test server now. 36 degrees per second with the stock turret, and 36 with the upgraded turret. So that's, well, 9 seconds to turn 180 degrees, or 9 seconds less to turn 180 degrees, makes a pretty fair difference. It basically brings this in line with the other Japanese cruisers. So that essentially it's still not great, but it's not noticeably worse than the other Japanese heavy cruisers. The other change for the Furutaka is that it now gets much better torpedoes, and in fact I would argue that it's actually got the best torpedoes at tier 5 now that the Minekaze has been nerfed. It's the only ship with a 10 kilometer torpedo range at this tier. The torpedoes do a lot of damage. The rate of fire is, well, 0.8 rounds per minute. It's probably about average for a cruiser. The only real downside to these torpedoes is they are quite slow. So you're probably really still, despite the 10 kilometer range, probably only really usable within a few kilometers, especially since your enemies will know you are there. Because, well, your detection range is still 12.2 kilometers, so they'll have spotted you at least 2 kilometers before you fire your torpedoes. Unless you're ambushing. There's one more change that I'd like to talk about, and I've got a replay in my Langley to discuss it, so we'll get into that and I'll introduce the topic over there. So here we are in the Langley, and the new feature that I want to talk about is that there is now a I suppose you call it a manual attack option for your fighter planes, which is like when using torpedo bombers or dive bombers. You hold down Alt and you will essentially be given a path which your fighters will then go and attack. Basically, they'll kind of strafe everything in that area. So basically the way I see it is that instead of going and dogfighting the enemy, they are instead using boom and zoom or energy fighting tactics, and they'll basically just come in, shoot straight ahead, fly straight past the enemy, kill a lot of them, and then keep going. I'm not actually sure if it's working as intended in the game at the moment. Basically, my understanding is that they'll come in, use a lot of their ammunition, kill a lot of the enemy, and then still be able to fight the rest of the enemy, but they'll have very little ammunition to do it. But in my experience, what tends to happen is that they come in, they do their initial pass, they destroy more of the enemy aircraft than they would normally, but they don't use a lot of ammunition, and then for some reason afterwards I just can't shoot anything else down, so I'm not entirely sure what's happening there. But you see me trying to do it here on these torpedo bombers. I guess kind of an intercept, order them to attack, try to change it, but I'm a bit too late. But it doesn't matter, we managed to shoot down 2 of the torpedo bombers in our little strafing run, and then catch 1 enemy fighter who was flying a long way behind it. Which means that I'm now going into this engagement with a 1 aircraft advantage over the enemy, but like I said, I'm just not... Fighters just didn't do anything. They had this air advantage, so I ordered them to attack these fighters. They've got plenty of ammunition, at least according to what it says down the bottom there, but I've already lost 2 and I haven't shot down any enemy aircraft. And well, it just keeps getting worse, and those fighters, they end up getting destroyed despite their numerical advantage at the start, so I think something's not quite right there yet. But anyway, you can see it happening here. I'm down to 4, the enemy have lost 1, but I didn't shoot them down, so there must be friendly AA fire helping me out here, but I've still only managed to shoot down 3 of the enemy. This dogfight was very confusing because me and the enemy are in the exact same plane, so I couldn't tell who was shooting at who. But there go my torpedo bombers. Going away at that battleship. And 2 hits, 3 hits. 2 hits. 3 hits. Caused some flooding too, so that guy's taken a fair bit of damage. Now only got 1 fighter left, and we still haven't shot down any of the enemy fighters. And well, I ordered them to attack again just in case it helps, but they're all shot down. So, if this is the way that this new feature is intended to be used, then well, I'm not sure I actually like it. It just gets my fighters killed immediately after they do their cool little burst thing. But fortunately this is Langley, and I've got plenty of fighters in reserve, so I'm getting my, I suppose it's the second half of the squadron back up in the air. Oh, one thing I did forget to mention in the Japanese carrier rebalancing is that the torpedo bombers now take longer to rearm. I can't remember off the top of my head how much longer. It's noticeable but not hugely significant. Well, that was my impression on the games I played. Probably just make them a bit less kind of the torpedo machine gunny things they are. Anyway, my fighters are back up in the air, my bombers are going into land, and I've basically just ordered my fighters to go in and protect these friendly cruisers that are capping B. Basically, my team's gone to B and A, while the enemy team have basically all gone into C. The one good thing about this match was that there were actually no destroyers on either team, so I felt a lot safer, considering that I'm in a very, very slow aircraft carrier, and if a destroyer did show up anywhere near me, I couldn't even delay my death by running away.
Our team has taken the lead.
Okay, we've captured A and B, so we're pretty well in the lead. We've also sunk 2 enemy ships to the 1 we've lost. This cruiser seems in a bit of a precarious position, but it actually has a really good game way out in front all by itself against the whole enemy team, but it was just one of those games. My torpedo bombers are back taking off, and I see a stationary battleship, and I think that will be a good target, but I decided it's stationary because it's probably AFK, so instead switch to bombing the nearer of these 2 enemy battleships because there are no cruisers escorting them, which means that I should be able to get a pretty good run on them. see the enemy torpedo bombers. And what I was trying to do now is that I've kind of figured out that, seen the way that the manual attack works. So I figured the way to do it is to get behind the enemy, and then they'll fly along in front of you as you do your manual strafing attack. So I was trying to set it up here. Unfortunately, I have to fly over these battleships, and the torpedo bombers are manoeuvring, so I'm not going to get a good run. So I ordered my fighters to pull out, and we'll try again later. Unfortunately, I lose one to anti-aircraft fire, which is far from ideal, and now the enemy fighters are showing up as well. Quickly change the target of my torpedo bombers to another battleship that's out isolated, since enemy fighters have also shown up thanks to my botched attempt at killing the enemy torpedo bombers. Who are now chasing me, and I decided, let's try this again. Fighters and torpedo bombers are in the same range. Decide to focus on the fighters. And we get the barrage in there quickly. Managed to shoot down 3 of the enemy fighters. And now you can see they're quite clearly chasing us. And we didn't lose any in that attack, but we lose one shortly afterwards. And now unfortunately I'm stuck fighting the enemy fighters over enemy AA guns. Which, as you can imagine, it doesn't go very well for me, and my 5 remaining fighters are shot down very quickly. Again, without shooting down any enemy fighters, but it's in this situation we wouldn't really expect them to, because they're just going to die. While that's happening, I actually managed to get 3 more torpedo hits on that enemy battleship that was off by itself. I paid absolutely no attention to what was happening, but my bombers did their things. Actually, now that I watched this engagement, I would have expected to have shot down at least one of those enemy fighters, just because the battle went on for so long. But it just didn't happen. So, as I say, I think something's not quite working right in this new mechanic. But anyway, I've got my final 3 fighters. They're all ready to take off. I'm leaving them on the deck at the moment because I haven't actually realised. I kind of assumed, I've lost my 2 flights of fighters. That's all I'm going to get. But nope, Langley gets 3 more. I'm just watching these enemy advance up here. Another change doing, you see that battleship is trying to avoid torpedoes by scraping along the edge of the map. They have now changed it so that torpedo targeting will take this into account, and as you saw those allied torpedoes that were fired at it, one of them managed to hit. Basically, you're not going to send your torpedoes off into the middle of nowhere when you're trying to hit enemies scraping along the edge of the map now. Okay, my fighters are up, my bombers are coming to land, and I figure the most likely target the enemy are going to go for will be this battleship, so I send my fighters down there to protect it. Unfortunately, these are low tier fighters, and they're going to take a very long time to get there. I say they're low tier, these are actually the upgraded fighters for the Langley, whereas the torpedo bombers I'm using are actually still the stock ones. But, I mean, they're doing alright for stock torpedo bombers. They've got 6 torpedo hits so far, it just takes them a long time to fly places and a long time to fly back. And I see that I was correct in my guess. The enemy torpedo bombers have come, and they're clearly going for this friendly battleship. But my fighters are just a little too far away to intercept them, unfortunately. But the good side of this is that I'm now going to be in a situation where I can really test this new mechanic in what I think is the ideal position for it, where I'm essentially chasing a retreating enemy, since they will stay in front of my fighters for a very long time. I've just got to try and catch up to these bombers first, and unfortunately the enemy fighters show up, so I decided not to risk it. I've only got 3 fighters left, and I was hoping the enemy fighters would come fight over this battleship, but they're not going to. The enemy aircraft carrier player was actually fairly onto it, considering that I was doing stupid things to try and test out this mechanic just to see how it works. I wouldn't normally send my fighters to fight over enemy AA guns. And when he hears me trying to do a manual drop on this Wyoming, I'm actually fairly rusty at manual drops, because I only have the Japanese carriers on the live server, and I don't really do manual drops that often in them. And I'm trying to gauge the range, but it's not a great attack. But you see, torpedoes are coming in. I'll get 1 or 2 hits there, I think. Especially if the battleship doesn't dodge. 2 hits. So I've been much more successful using auto aiming than my manual aim, but practice makes perfect. It's really just a case of knowing your torpedo bomber's speed and knowing the speed of the enemy ships and which way they're likely to dodge if they're going to dodge. And I just need a bit of practice. I'm not used to the Langley's planes anymore. So while my bombers are reloading and my fighters are waiting for the enemy torpedo bombers to show back up, kind of just watching what's happening. Decide I'm going to order the Langley to go in and capture B. I was kind of assuming by the time I get there the enemy will be long gone, but wasn't to be. Okay, here we go. The torpedo bombers are coming back. I send my fighters to protect this battleship. And I decide they can just go straight away and attack the torpedo bombers. Just trying to get there before they launch their torpedoes to try and make them fire on a wide spread. Doesn't look like they actually managed to do it. I think they got there in time. But now I use the manual attack while I'm immediately behind the torpedo bombers. And you see they follow along behind them for a long time. Get 1, 2, 3 shot down plus the one they got before, and 1 lost anti-aircraft fire means there's only 1 enemy torpedo bomber left. I send my 3 fighters to finish it off. And unfortunately this torpedo bomber is actually, well, it seems to be about the same speed as my fighters, so we're not actually catching it very quickly. And we're slowly gaining ground. Get my torpedo bombers up in the air because they're going to take a long time to get anywhere. I decide to send my fighters back because, well, the enemy fighters are, well, they've come back and I haven't had much luck at fighting these fighters. And well, I went to go do the manual attack on them again, but they flew away, so, well, that's that. Set my torpedo bombers up to attack this battleship. And just seeing what's happening. I've actually sent my fighters back to the carrier to rearm. Figured since the enemy had just done their torpedo bomber attack I wouldn't see them for a while, so it'd be a good time to rearm. While that's happening I can focus on getting my torpedo bomber attack just right. And if you've been paying attention to the strategic thing of this game, we've actually been winning pretty easily, our team. We're way up on points, way up on ships, but the enemy are doing just enough to kind of stick in the match, which is good because it's giving me a chance to play around with the new manual fighter attack thing. Decided to try a manual torpedo attack because, well, I need the practice, and this looks a bit better. Still giving that guy way too long to dodge if they chose to dodge, but it doesn't. 3 hits and caused a bit of flooding as well. So, well, now I'm about equaling my auto attack success. And my plan to rearm and get back out there by the time the enemy torpedo bombers arrived was flawed. Essentially my carrier is much further away from the battle than the enemy Langley is. But we'll get there before their second torpedo attack comes in. Hopefully. And well, I did a lot of damage to that battleship, so it should lose that fight. It just died and lost a lot of health in 1 big hit. And now there's actually not a lot left on the enemy team. They're all down around the sea capture point, where they've kind of been loitering the whole game. But as I said, they've been sticking at it. We're almost won. And, well, it looks like my fighters weren't going to arrive in time to defeat their second torpedo bomber attack. But it also looks like they're getting very low on torpedo bombers. And, well, that was the game. So I kind of got to try out that new manual attack a fair bit, which it was pretty good to just test it out, but I'm not sure. I just don't think it's quite working properly, or if it is, I'm clearly missing something that I should be doing, because it's actually not that effective if you can't then go and use them afterwards. But anyway, I hope you found this video informative or useful or interesting. and I'll see you all next time.